Hey everybody, my name's Hiro. We're in Minnesota right now fishing in Wild River State Park right along the beautiful St. Croix River. We're going to use bottom fishing rigs with some worms and use some no-roll sinkers, and we'll just fish for whatever bites today. So we'll see. It was a bit of a hike getting in here, but we're here. We found a great spot. Got a little muck on my shoes from digging around on the shorelines, but here we go. We'll get out there. So we've got bells on the top of our rods. Those bells will go off if we get even the smallest bites. And I like using them when I'm fishing the river because it's just super exciting to have one of those bells going off knowing there's a fish playing with your worm on the bottom. Alright, so the cool thing about using bells when you're bottom fishing is you're able to look away, you can sit down, read a book, and you're waiting for that bell to go off. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for one of those bells to go off, I'll talk about a little bit more about what we're using today and how I'm using it. So we're using bottom fishing rigs for bait. I like using these size 4 circle hooks. Circle hooks have a little bit lower probability of getting swallowed by the fish. So I like circle hooks. Sometimes they're also called octopus hooks. You can use those too. So size 4. And then I'm using no-roll sinkers. And no-roll sinkers, this is a 4 ounce, but you can see it really well. It's flat. That no-roll sinker sits on the bottom really nicely. So when you're in high current, if you use a bullet sinker or an egg sinker, that's just going to get pushed around and rolled down the river. But with with a flat no-roll sinker like this, you can actually stay on the bottom a lot better. So I will go with a no-roll sinker to a barrel swivel to some leader to one of these hooks, and then put a half a worm, half a Nightcrawler on there, and that's a really good river bait fishing rig. Works for everything. Oh yeah, it's a fish. Fish on. Oh, it actually feels pretty good. Wow, wow. What is this? Oh my gosh. Either really big or it's wrapped around something. But if it's not wrapped around something and it's big, it could be a big sturgeon. Or a massive red horse. But it is oh wow, yeah, it's just a big fish. Oh my gosh, what is this? I have no idea. Where's my net? Wow. Oh my gosh. This could be a really nice fish. It's fighting like a sturgeon. They stay low. They don't have really big head shakes. Oh, and they're just heavy. Wow. Oh, I can see him. It's really good. Oh.
Holy.
Oh, is it a giant smallmouth? It might be a giant smallmouth. Oh my gosh. Wow, 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 wow. Oh, he's taking drag. This could be my personal best smallmouth. Wow, 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 wow. Oh my gosh. It's a huge smallmouth, Emma. Huge. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Wow. in close enough, right? What? No way. Look at the size of that smallmouth. Oh my gosh. Wow. See if I can get that hook out. There we go. Wow. That is a monster smallmouth bass. Wow. Came off a worm on the bottom. Jeez, look at that fish. Wow. Wow. Okay. So our second rod, while we were trying to bring that smallmouth bass in, had a couple taps. I went ahead and took the bells off. A lot of times red horse, when they hit, they'll tap and then they'll sit with the bait in their mouth. So I'm actually going to lift up this rod, set the hook, because there might be a red horse sitting on it right now. Or even it could be bullhead, red horse. A lot of fish that will eat these worms will do that. All right, here we go. Nope, nothing. Could have been a little bluegill. So we'll check the bait. The bait's still good, so we'll get it right back out there. Here we go. Rod number one. That's definitely my personal best smallmouth bass. It was so heavy on the rod that I wondered if maybe the fish got us hung up on something, but it wasn't hung up. It was just a big, heavy smallmouth bass. So that was definitely personal best. That's going to be super hard to beat on any gear, spin, fly, anything. So that was super cool. St. Croix River is pretty well known for its smallmouth bass fishery, all the way up and down from way up north, parts of Wisconsin, as it comes down through Minnesota, hits Stillwater. That whole section is known for its smallmouth bass. So my experience fishing, I grew up in Colorado. I was born and raised in Colorado, and so my dad and I fished a lot of front range lakes and ponds. And we spent our weekends, we'd drive up into the Rocky Mountains and fish all over the Rocky Mountains, but primarily my favorite place was Jefferson Lake near Fairplay, Colorado. And that was really where I cut my teeth as a young angler and grew to love fishing and love the environments that I was in while I was fishing. And so that's what brought me here. Wherever I go, I try to fish and catch the fish that I find and learn from the people that know the fisheries. So this is a great opportunity to continue learning about smallmouth bass fishing. Okay. So I have both rods back in the water. Line tension is super important, so I've got my line tension. There's a straight line from my weight to my rod tip. So I'm going to go ahead and put the bells back on, and we'll just hang out and wait for a bell to go off. So I think I'm going to recast. Usually when you're fishing bait on the bottom, you don't want to recast a lot, because what ends up happening is you're moving that bait around and the scent trail drifting downstream, the fish can't follow. But sometimes you get a fishy feeling and you want to check your bait. You're seeing weird bouncing on your rod tip, maybe a little mud puppy has your worm, and so I'm going to go ahead and take the bells off, reel it in, check my bait, and then just recast. I like to point a little bit upstream with my cast, that way when it drifts down with the current, it'll catch on a rock and I can tighten up my line tension, and my rods more or less are straight across the current or a little bit downstream. It's definitely something small playing with the rod I just casted out there. Again, it could be like a big school of small minnows swarming around it. I've seen this kind of behavior recently. get like 2 dozen little minnows that are just big enough to make the rod tip bounce and vibrate, but not big enough to actually take the bait. So I'm thinking right now we're on a bit of a flat. I'm noticing it's pretty rocky out where we're at and shallow. So I'm considering trying a little bit of top water, maybe throwing some sort of popper or buzz bait, and just seeing if I can drum something up fishing topwater bait like that. It's overcast, and overcast weather is usually pretty good for topwater fishing, so I might try some topwater, leave one rod out in the water with a worm and take one rod and throw a topwater lure. I'm going to try a buzz bait just because it's you're covering a lot of water really fast. It makes a really good trail, and the water we're fishing right now is pretty flat, and so having that nice flat water, this buzz bait will show up really well, and I'll be able to cover a lot of water really quickly. I was just telling Emma that I'm still shaky from that bass. My hands are all wobbly, and I just keep replaying the bite over and over. Man, that was a nice smallmouth bass. Alright, I think I'm going to swap over to hula popper because sometimes they like that pop and pause, and this is a very action-oriented topwater. Yeah, I think bait's where it's at. We'll swap back over to worms and try that for the rest of the time here. So I'm kind of wondering, we haven't gotten any other bites since we got that smallmouth bass, and I'm thinking since it is a little shallow, there's a lot of rocks on the bottom, that smallmouth bass was cruising in between those rocks, and my bait dropped in front of one of its little cruising zones. So I think in this area what we're waiting for is when I cast out, we're waiting for fish to come cruising through, rather than fish that are grouped up in this one spot. So I think that's what's going on based on the fact that we got one little bite a little bit upstream, like one small one, a tap, and that was it. And so far I haven't had much. So I'm gonna get this second rod set up with another worm. We'll get the worm back out there. I'll recast in two little areas and we'll see if we can find a channel where those fish are cruising through. So I think I'm gonna try to get this cast about where I caught that smallmouth bass and see if that might be the channel. Yep, fish on. Fish on. Oh, nope, I'm snagged. So sometimes what happens is the mud puppies, smaller fish will grab your bait and mess with it and then pull you under a rock. So I'm going to take the bell off and see if I can get my snag out. So as I was bringing it in, thinking all I did was get the snag out, I actually got the snag out and got the fish. So we got a second fish on here. And wow, he's moving around super quick. Let's see what he is. That's another small smallmouth, a smaller smallmouth. Not tiny, not a little bounce, little jump. Come here, buddy. Sweet. Yeah, here we go. Smallmouth number 2. So when you're bait fishing, sometimes what can happen is that fish will swallow the hook, and you don't want to just dig down in there or rip the hook out because you can hurt the fish. This fish swallowed that worm, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the line as close to the mouth as I can get and then release the fish. That hook will either get burnt away by the fish's own stomach acids or rust away in the water, or the fish can even pass it. So for this fish, I'm going to make sure to cut the line as close to the mouth as I can and then release him. All right, buddy. There you go. All right, well, we got some rain coming. We knew there was going to be some weather. That was last fish of the day. We had some great fishing today. 2 nice smallmouth bass. That was super fun. But we're going to get packed up and head out of here before we get soaked by this rain.